Well, turning now to the war in the Middle East, Israel's military says it killed 3 Hamas commanders in airstrikes over the Gaza Strip. And the Associated Press is reporting that heavy fighting has erupted around another hospital in northern Gaza, where hundreds of patients and displaced people have reportedly sought shelter. According to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, an Israeli strike on the hospital killed at least 12 people. CBS News has not verified those claims. Meanwhile, at the Al-Shifa hospital, Israeli Defense Forces released video of what it claims is a Hamas tunnel under the besieged medical complex, including a sniper hole and a blast-proof door. 28 premature babies who were evacuated from Al-Shifa hospital have reportedly crossed into Egypt to receive medical treatment. Yesterday, however, health officials said 31 premature babies had been safely moved from the hospital. This comes as sources tell CBS News that negotiators are getting closer to an agreement with Hamas to release an initial 50 hostages in exchange for more aid into Gaza and a limited pause in fighting. Our Wendy Gillette has more.
A top Biden administration official says they are closer than ever to reaching a deal between Israel and Hamas to release some of the hostages.
On an issue as sensitive as this and as challenging as this, the mantra that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed really does apply, and we do not yet have an agreement in place.
In a Washington Post op-ed, President Biden said he and his team are working hour by hour to get the hostages released, and he pushed for a two-state solution. Israeli defense officials have released new images that they say prove that Hamas had terrorist infrastructure at the Al-Shifa hospital, which the terror group denies. The Israelis also showed alleged video of hostages being moved inside the hospital.
The Israel Defense Forces has a moral obligation to bring every one of our hostages home. We will not rest until we do.
Hamas is believed to have taken roughly 240 hostages during its deadly October 7th attacks in Israel. Yesterday, survivors of the Nova Music Festival raid were able to look for the personal items they and their loved ones left behind.
We saw a lot of happy moments here of people finding their belongings and some sentimental objects that they are searching for.
And back in Gaza, the tiniest survivors of the war-torn region, dozens of premature Palestinian babies were evacuated from the Al-Shifa hospital and will receive medical care in Egypt today. Wendy Gillette, CBS News.
Meanwhile, Yemen's Houthi rebels claimed they seized an Israeli cargo ship in the Red Sea yesterday, taking 25 crew members hostage. Israel denied those claims, saying the vessel is British-owned and Japanese-operated, but called the incident a, quote, Iranian act of terrorism. A spokesperson for Japan's government today confirmed the capture of one of their ships and says that they are appealing to Houthis to release the vessel and its crew. The Yemeni rebels are supported by Iran, but Iran has denied involvement. So joining me now to discuss this from the White House, all the developments in the Middle East, is CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. Weijia, good morning. Weijia, I think, you know, sort of the big news now, it seems that we are closer than ever to sort of getting to the end of negotiations to at least have some of these hostages released. We know that the White House has been playing a key role, though perhaps not with immediate negotiations. But what can you tell us about, you know, the White House role here, how the White House is feeling about how things are developing?
The U.S. and Qatar has played a critical role as they continue to try to help broker this deal, which, Anne-Marie, as you mentioned, appears to be getting closer. At least that is what the Deputy National Security Advisor, John Feiner, said yesterday on Face the Nation. He said that where there were areas of differences, those seem to be narrowing, but of course they are proceeding with caution. And the president himself spoke about this yesterday, saying that he doesn't want to talk about too many details until he is able to secure an agreement and bring those hostages home. So, Anne-Marie, so far what we know, according to our colleague, Margaret Brennan, is that there is no final agreement, but there is a written draft that is being passed around between parties as they try to, you know, get to the final language that everybody can get on board with. And we're talking about the release of about 50 hostages in the first round that would require a ceasefire for several hours a day, and then there would be more hostages if that were to succeed. And of course, because of the sensitivity around this, the White House is not releasing much in terms of conditions or what Hamas is asking for, but certainly they have an optimistic tone, Anne-Marie, one that has been getting increasingly optimistic over the past several days.
That's really good to hear. Let me ask you quickly, Weijia, over the weekend, the president, an op-ed that the president wrote was printed in the Washington Post. He talked about the war in the Middle East. He talked about the threat that Putin poses. Did we learn anything sort of new about how the president is approaching these conflicts?
Well, he really reiterated his vision about how the wars, especially in the Middle East, should play out. And he once again tried to stress to Americans here why these conflicts, even though they may feel like they are thousands of miles away, actually are connected to national security here at home. And that is why he is so focused on trying to find a resolution or help find a resolution to both of these. But Anne-Marie, when it comes to the war in Gaza, you know, the president, for the first time, indicated that Israel might not be doing enough to stop the violence, and he did threaten sanctions against Israeli settlers who attack Palestinians. And so that was something that I think there was a mounting pressure for him to do, because there are a lot of questions and concerns about whether Israel is doing enough to minimize civilian casualties. He also laid out what he thinks should be the solution after the war. It is once again a call for a two-state solution, but he says a, quote, revitalized Palestinian Authority should be in control thereafter. And of course, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has said that for a time at least, indefinitely, there should be a security role that Israel plays in Gaza, which could be interpreted easily as reoccupation, which the president says is not a solution. And he also called for the end of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. But I think what we saw from the president was just reiterating his position and trying to offer some sort of vision for what the U.S. believes should happen. But Anne-Marie, when you're talking about the actual parties fighting and involved, it seems like they are very far, at least right now, from what the president has proposed.
Yeah, it certainly does seem that way. Weijia, thank you very much.
Sure.